Hello, my name is Wesley. I thought I was just sitting down at my son's dinner table, breaking bread with family. But the air felt heavy, the smiles too sharp. Then my phone buzzed one text that ripped through my chest. Your son isn't who you think. Leave now, don't confront him. I froze, fork in hand, wondering if the betrayal at that table was already complete or if the real truth was still waiting to crush me. The rideshare pulled away, leaving me at the curb with the weight of a cheap bottle of wine tucked in my hand. The label looked fancier than what it was, but it cost me a good slice of my pension check. I stood for a moment under the dim streetlight, coat buttoned neat, hat snug on my head, and looked at Montclair's picture-perfect rows of houses. Lawns trimmed like they had rulers laid across them, porches dressed with wreaths, even though it wasn't Christmas yet, just late fall, a kind of quiet wealth. My roots were Newark, where the pride was in sweat and cracked knuckles, not spotless hedges. I breathed deep, steadying myself before I walked up the steps. My chest was a knot, half eager, half braced. A father shouldn't feel like a stranger knocking on his son's door, but that's where I was. The thought hit me sharp. A man is only invisible when the people closest to him stop seeing him. The door swung open before I could knock twice. My boy, Trevon, stood there with a smile that looked practiced. Lips stretched, but eyes too quick. Scanning me over. "Pop," he said, voice high, like he'd rehearsed it. Behind him, Shanitra stood a step back. Her smile was softer, but her eyes cut sharper. She let me step inside with a grace that felt more like inspection than welcome. The warmth of the house hit me, rosemary and butter drifting from the kitchen. I held onto my hat longer than I needed to, unsure where it belonged in a place that didn't feel like mine. I told myself, hospitality should be warm. This one felt staged. I made it 3 steps before the wall caught me. Family portraits lined up, neat graduations, birthdays, trips. Every face familiar, every smile bright. But I wasn't in a single one. Photos I remembered taking, moments I'd stood behind the lens for, cropped so I didn't exist. I stopped longer than I should have, letting my eyes burn quiet. "Nice frames," I said, calm on the surface. Inside, I knew silence cuts sharper than any knife when it scrubs you out of your own bloodline. "Come on, Mr. Elridge," Shanitra said. Her tone sweet as tea, poured over ice, but colder than it looked. She called me like a clerk reading off a list. My son tried again, Pop, but it landed flat, no weight. I set my hat down on a sleek console table that held a candle too pretty to burn. No ashtray, no place for the grit of a working man. I thought of back home, where respect wasn't staged. It was in the firm look of another man's eyes. When I stepped into the dining room, the shine nearly blinded me. Crystal glasses, polished silver, linen folded like art. But at the far end, the chair left for me carried nothing but a plain white napkin, tossed careless. Everyone else had their setting arranged just right. Mine was an afterthought. I didn't speak. My silence wasn't weakness. It was a stone, laid down, heavy, meant to be felt. I reached to pull a chair closer to my son, but Shanitra's voice slid in, smooth as butter hiding a blade. "We kept you by the warm door, Mr. Elridge. Easier for the servers." Guests chuckled, unsure if they should. My chair sat nearest the kitchen, where the swinging door would clip my shoulder. I nodded slow, not because I agreed, but because sometimes silence is the last dignity a man can hold. Respect is the seat they give you or deny you. The music hummed low, old neo-soul classics I knew by heart, but it sounded too polished, curated for show. I glanced at a stack of untouched cookbooks on the shelf. Pretty covers, no grease, no burn marks. Not like mine at home, pages worn and stained from real meals, cooked for real mouths. I thought of smoke-filled yards in Newark, ribs on the grill, voices loud with truth and laughter. That memory steadied me. I wasn't ashamed of the scars on my hands. The small cuts came quick. "How's your knee, Mr. Elridge?" someone asked. Eyes not meeting mine. Another leaned in. "Is Uber comfortable?" Polite words, but dipped in something else. I handed over the wine, my little gift. Shanitra lifted it with 2 fingers, placed it far on the counter, out of reach. "Thank you," she said, flat, no glance back. That was her way of saying, "We'll set you aside too." I smiled faintly to myself. My mother used to say, some folks would rather polish glass than hold a hand. That thought carried me. I took the plain napkin, folded it myself, smoothed the corners, laid it across my lap. No one gave me dignity, so I claimed my own. If they wouldn't honor me, I'd honor myself. The kitchen door swung open just then, a young face flashing quick Omarique, eyes darting like he knew more than the room let on. My son filled the silence with talk of promotions, mortgages, money pressed heavy on his voice. I listened close, the way old men do, catching the strain in the words not said. The fire burned in the hearth, but the room felt colder. I lifted my glass of water, stem humming against the cloth, ringing soft like a bell. My eyes went back to that photo wall, every picture screaming with my absence. Rooms tell stories, even when mouths stay shut. And as that hum lingered in my hand, I thought, my water glass sounded like a warning bell, and I hadn't yet decided whether to listen. I laid the napkin I had folded across my lap, its edges straight, a small order in the middle of all that noise. The table stretched long and glossy, light bouncing off crystal that looked more like museum pieces than something meant to hold water. I marked the seating without thinking. Trevon to my right, Shanitra across from me, neighbors filling the ends, smiling like they were on stage. The playlist shifted, another neo-soul classic everybody in that room knew, but nobody dared sing. Too afraid to break the perfect arrangement. I offered a calm smile, rehearsed from years of keeping peace. Manners cost you nothing, but they'll tell on you, I thought. And right then they told me I was here to be displayed, not embraced. My bottle of wine still sat parked away, out of reach, forgotten but not forgotten. I made a note of it in my head. The neighbors went first. "Do you still drive at night?" one asked, voice carrying that half-interest people use when they already wrote the answer. Another chimed in, "How's your blood pressure holding up?" They meant well on the surface. But the surface was thin. It was coated, and everybody at the table knew it. I answered plain, "I'm steady." That was enough. No apology, no details. I caught how Trevon let their smirks ride, how his lips curved just enough to avoid responsibility. I thought of Baldwin's words. Not everything faced can be changed, but nothing changes until it's faced. My pride sat exposed, but I kept it upright. I wouldn't hand them my temper, not as confirmation of what they already whispered. Omarique moved like water, setting the plates down in silence. I didn't need to say his name again. I knew who he was. Steady hands, sharp eyes. The first course came in little stacked portions, garnished like pictures out of untouched cookbooks. Pretty food. I thought of the smoke pits back in Newark, meat dripping, ribs flipped with bare hands, seasoning from sweat as much as spice. This was theater. I looked at it anyway and said, "Looks careful." It was praise, but also a mirror. Care is different from love, and I knew which one fed people. I kept my eyes from the bottle across the room. I wasn't going to beg for the respect that should have been simple. Then the main dish arrived. All claps and chatter. Shanitra leaned forward, smiling like a host on television. Trevon's family recipe been in our line for years. My fork hit the plate, and my jaw clenched before the bite even touched my mouth. That spice, that vinegar snap, the brown sugar blooming at the finish. It was mine, down to the way the flavors layered, the rub I had guarded, the taste built over decades of trial and burn. I chewed slow, every grain a record in my mind. I said, "Tastes like history." She grinned, thinking I meant hers. Elders in black families know the truth. When something from your hand shows up without your name, it's not legacy, it's theft. I stayed quiet. Silence was my ledger, line after line recorded. My son's eyes kept flicking to me. He wanted approval, though he played at not needing it. His pride wavered, pride built on a recipe he hadn't earned. "We've been perfecting it," he said, not meeting my gaze. What he meant was, "We've been selling you without saying so." I asked simple, "What heat you cook this on?" He answered wrong. Not just wrong, but careless. He didn't even know the bones of what he was serving. I let the mistake sit in the room like smoke no one could wave away. A lesson I had lived my whole life. Don't taste what you can't admit you borrowed. I wouldn't shame him in front of strangers. Not yet. But inside, I drew my line. If it crossed further, I'd face it head on. The next cut came dressed as humor. Shanitra leaned toward the neighbors, her voice soft and polished. "We keep the old man away from the grill liability and all." Laughter ran down the table, polite and practiced. It sounded like a verdict. I set my fork down slow, metal against china, and I looked straight at my son first, not her. He shifted, shoulders pulling up in a half shrug, like he was saying, "I can't stop it." But he could have. He just didn't. I spoke calm. These hands put food in this family's mouth when stoves were cold. The quiet that followed wasn't anger, it was respect forced into the open. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't have to. Shanitra moved quick, turning the conversation toward mortgages, Crystal, neighborhood safety. She was good at it, handling, not hosting. People followed her rhythm like she held the baton. I leaned back, watching her work the table like a stage. Hosting is about giving. Handling is about control. Tonight, I was being handled. I thought, masks get hot, and hers was no different. Omarique set water in front of me, his hand lingering just long enough to register. No words, but the message slid through. Pay attention. I didn't break the play. Just a thank you with my eyes. The kind a man gives when he recognizes another man reading the room. I smoothed my napkin again, ritual steadying my chest. My mother's voice hummed. Measure twice, cut once even with people. Suspicion pressed at me, but I caged it. Patience was the only tool I trusted tonight. Toasts rose next. Shanitra's name glowed. My son's too. Their neighbors clinking and praising. My name stayed absent. My bottle stayed untouched. I lifted water instead, and the room didn't notice, or pretended not to. Words like legacy got tossed around like brand names. Legacy is built in sweat, not labels. I said little, watched much. Inside I weighed what I'd let pass, and what I wouldn't. My son had one more chance. I wasn't going to tell him it was already there in my silence. Finally, Shanitra turned, sliding the glass toward me, her smile polished like silver. I lifted it, rim hovering just near my lips. The whole room looked, waiting for me to drink more than what was in that cup. I set it back down, slow, the stem ringing sharp against the tablecloth. A chime clear as a line drawn in the sand. I decided to taste the room before I tasted anything else. I steadied my breath, napkin still, laid across my lap from before, no need to fuss with it again. The chandelier hummed above, forks tapped soft rhythms. The playlist drifted steady in the background. Everything here was staged, every smile painted on for the evening. My bottle, the one I'd carried in with careful pride, still sat away from me, parked like some ornament instead of an offering. I let it stay where it was. I told myself again, taste the room before I taste anything else. My eyes went to Trayvon's hands. He laughed at some neighbor's joke, but his fingers shook just enough to betray him. I locked that detail in. I wouldn't jump at shadows. I'd move only on what I could see and prove. The vibration against my thigh jolted me harder than the laughter. I kept my face a mask as I slid the phone lower, under the edge of the table. Unknown number. The message was short. Sharp. Your son isn't who you think. Leave now. Don't confront him. My chest tightened, but I kept my breath calm. Elders' etiquette phones don't rule the table, not in front of company. I clicked the screen black and tucked it deeper into my pocket. Lifted my water glass slow, masking the move. My mind whispered an old rhythm. When the drum changes, you change your step. I wouldn't panic. Panic wastes oxygen. I decided to watch longer, to gather truth, brick by brick. Shanitra kept up her stream about renovations, but her smile never touched her eyes. Trayvon laughed a half-beat too late, like he was catching up to his own lines. Guilt never could keep rhythm. The neighbors filled the gaps with safe talk school ratings, mortgage rates, new appliances. Their chatter floated light, but I heard the weight in what wasn't said. Omarike moved past, placing a plate, his glance cutting straight through me before shifting away. Just a beat, but enough. Maya Angelou came to me clear as a bell. When people show you who they are, believe them. I slowed myself, almost in defiance, letting time stretch, watching pores, watching hands, watching who was watching me. Shanitra reached for the decanter with a smile too polished. Let's finally toast, she said, tone not asking but telling. She poured into my glass herself, deliberate in the tilt, the angle, the performance. I lifted the stem, rotated it slow. The legs clung higher than I expected. Maybe the room was warm, maybe something more. I brought it near my nose, heat rising that didn't bring comfort. I said nothing. Trayvon threw out a quick joke to push me along, his eyes ducking from mine. I set the glass back down untouched. Nobody called it out. And that silence that told me more than a sip ever could. My father's voice came back. A man who keeps his head, keeps his life. I scanned the room without turning my head. Front door, hallway, kitchen swing door, all logged. I thought of papers signed under pressure, names scribbled by men who'd had too much to drink. I wouldn't be one of them. I lowered my voice, asked simple, practical questions. Facts didn't need volume. My silence worked like smoke, drifting, seeping, revealing cracks in their composure. I leaned toward Trayvon, asking about the cut of meat, just detail enough to test him without drawing attention. His answer was all brand names, no temperatures. Show, not skill. I watched him glance at my untouched glass, then look away quick. That look carried more truth than any words. I gave him one out, low and steady. You good? His nod was too fast, too thin. He shut the door on himself. The cracks started to show. A neighbor lifted their glass for a toast, voices rising. My glass stayed grounded near my plate. Shanitra's gaze landed on it, sharp and unrelenting. I chose water, switching clean, smooth enough nobody at the far end noticed. Omarike refilled me, his hand pausing at my wrist a second longer than needed. A quiet signal, don't drink. I thanked him without words, just a look. Talking would have shattered the thin ice beneath us. The phone in my pocket pressed against my leg like a lit match. I decided then, I'd step away. Not out of fear, but because truth rarely stayed in plain sight. It hid behind doors, in kitchens, in the quiet places. I rehearsed a simple excuse in my mind. Restroom, wash hands, no drama. Gentlemen, slow. I folded the napkin edge smooth again, laid it down with care, looked once more at Trevon, giving him the last chance to stop this without a scene. He stared at the tablecloth instead. That was my answer. I rose. The phone buzzed again just as I took a step toward the hall. I didn't check it. The kitchen door swung open, light spilling across the floor. Omarike stood there, still and solid, like a sign planted in my path. From behind me, Shanitra's voice floated. Syrup sweet. Everything okay, Mr. Elridge? I said I was headed to the restroom, but my feet already knew which door mattered. I stepped off the dining rug into the narrow hallway, the air cooler here. The hum of conversation dimmed to a muffled murmur. Shanitra's voice floated after me. Syrupy sweet. Everything okay, Mr. Elridge? I didn't turn. Restroom, I said evenly, keeping my stride steady. My feet carried me toward the kitchen swing door, not the powder room. I didn't need a map. Truth had a way of breathing from certain corners. The scuffs on the floor near the kitchen told a story of traffic the guests never saw. I steadied my breath, phone heavy in my pocket. Reminder that I was playing by rules I hadn't agreed to. My aim was simple. Look, listen, and leave no mark. The vibration came sharp against my thigh. I cupped the phone low, shielding it from the dining room's line of sight. Another unknown text, urgent this time. Get up and go, now. Don't say anything to your son. Kitchen, back gate. The hall stood empty, but for framed art trying too hard to look rich, and the heat rising faint from behind the swing door. My eyes scanned corners, searching for cameras. This house liked control, but it didn't account for mine. I pressed the screen dark again and slipped it away. No panic. Panic burns through air. A good plan waits its moment. If you can't trust the party, trust the exits, I told myself. I pushed the kitchen door with 2 fingers. Steam met me. Citrus cleaner riding the air. Stainless steel counters lined up like soldiers. Too quiet, too arranged. Pots simmered on low, but there was no heartbeat of real cooking. This was staged, set to match the show in the dining room. I stood just inside, out of sight, letting silence announce me, and then I found him Omarike, his eyes locking on mine. Not long, just enough to say, "This is why you came." We didn't waste names. He tipped his chin toward the prep counter, then toward the back vestibule. His rag circled the same spot twice, not wiping, but speaking a code. Wait, then move. I kept my hands visible, posture calm. I knew how to look like I belonged in other men's kitchens. The only sound was the slow simmer of a pot that wasn't really cooking anything. From the front of the house, faint laughter floated, rehearsed, like a track on repeat. I nodded once, the old way of saying, "I hear you." He came close, reaching for a towel, voice so low it rode the steam more than the air. "Don't drink. The bottle ain't right." He didn't meet my eyes. He spoke to the sink. "They poured yours separate." My mouth stayed still. "Who?" I asked with only a breath. His answer was one word carried on exhale. "Her." Then, "Back gate. 3rd house. Call your ride there." His words landed like stones in water clear, sinking fast. Something inside me shifted, fear turning into clean steel. "Thank you," I whispered, not to make him brave, but to tell him he was seen. I scanned the counters, not moving fast. 2 glasses sat on the drying rack, faint film clinging inside one, another set apart like it held a different, Story. A small funnel. Towel. Nearby. Ordinary tools that told enough. I leaned toward the decanter, smelled oak, heat, and an edge sharp as disinfectant. Not proof for a courtroom, but proof for a man who's lived enough kitchens. I didn't touch a thing. Fingerprints give people permission to write stories that ain't yours. I locked the picture in my head, decanter here, glasses there. I let my thumb rest on my phone's emergency dial. Ready but not pressed. I turned the faucet. Let water run. Splashed my hands. Noise for cover. A man washing up, that's all anyone would see. I tore a paper towel slow, drying my fingers like nothing mattered. Behind me, Omarique slid a trash bag under the counter, giving me room to step left toward the vestibule. The front still buzzed with curated laughter. I straightened my tie in the reflection of a steel cabinet. Small motions, but they cloaked me in normal. Men who rush look guilty. Men who decide look whole. I pictured the back gate, the latch swinging outward, the yard light, the lattice fence beyond. I palmed my keys, though I'd come by rideshare. Habit metal steadies the mind. My thumb hovered on the app, waiting for when the night air hit my face. Pride told me to storm back into that dining room, flip the table, demand answers. Wisdom told me, storms don't argue with storms, they walk out of their way. My mother's words, again. I chose dignity that breathes, over ego that suffocates. Trevon's face came to me then, his laugh thin, his eyes dodging mine. The boy I'd taught to slice bread without nicking his hand. I bargained with myself. Maybe he didn't know, maybe he couldn't stop it. But maybe is a coward's word. My life wasn't his lesson to learn late. Love and survival don't always sit together. I decided I'd call the law if I had to, but first I'd get myself out whole. My hand touched the latch, cold metal sang quiet in my palm. The phone buzzed again, same unknown, or something worse. I didn't look. Night air seeped through the crack, carrying leaves and the smell of freedom. I whispered to myself, truth passes first, then courage follows. I opened the gate just enough for the air to slip through. Damp leaves, wet earth, November breathing on my skin. The phone buzzed again in my pocket, but I left it alone. I needed the sound of my own breath more than I needed somebody else's instructions. My fingers curled around the wood post, the scars on my knuckles catching the grain. These hands had built, carried, and buried more than I care to count. I thought of men I grew up with who never got the chance to step back from a line like this. Men swallowed by silence or by pride. I weighed it all. Walk away now, and I'd keep my body safe. But my silence would leave the truth buried in their soil. I knew what that kind of silence taught. You survive, but without honor. Pop? His voice came soft, almost rehearsed. Trevon stepped out. Shoulders rolled back like he was calm, but his body gave him away. I remembered the first time I let him drive, how his hand shook on the wheel. Same tremor now. He said, "Everything's fine inside. You're making it weird." The boy's tone tried to smooth things over, but his eyes swam like they couldn't hold a steady anchor. I gave him silence, long and heavy. Silence has a way of breaking weak walls. He filled it fast. You know Shanitra just wants order. She don't mean nothing by it. A father's heart is the heaviest bag you'll ever carry. It holds grief and love at the same time. I thought about the day he was born, the first time he cried. I thought about when he was 12, asking why men leave their families. I wanted to believe he didn't know what was being poured into my glass tonight. But my bones told me otherwise. "Son, you got something to tell me?" I asked it plain, without raising my voice. His answer snapped out too quick. No, Pop. Why would I? Too thin, too easy. A lie ain't just words, it's how fast it comes out. I stepped closer, not to tower over him, but so he could feel truth between us. My voice stayed low, but I let the weight drop in every word. I've been quiet long enough. Don't mistake my patience for blindness. His eyes flickered, and I pressed on. If you let harm cross my plate, I will burn the table down myself. His face froze, mask slipping just enough for me to see the boy hiding behind it. He tried to laugh it off, but I didn't return it. For the first time in years, I wasn't speaking as a guest in his house. I was his father. The phone buzzed again. I let it vibrate, humming against my leg while I thought. 2 doors. One into the night, where I could disappear. One back inside where the lies lived, waiting. Baldwin's words came to me. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. My body longed to leave. My spirit said, not yet. I turned toward the dining room. Not for the food, for the truth. Pop, don't start something tonight, Trevon pleaded. We'll talk later. I looked him straight in the face. Later is how men end up buried early. His lips parted like he wanted to fight me, then shut again. His head bent, neck heavy under guilt. Just, don't embarrass me, he muttered. I walked past him without a word. Shame wasn't mine to carry. The door closed behind, and the heat of the dining room wrapped me again, colder than the November air. I sat back down and folded my napkin, not to hide behind manners, but to mark my place. This fight wasn't done. I decided then I'd watch every pore, every glance, every slip of the hand. I wouldn't drink, but I'd drink in every detail. When the truth was ready, I'd drop it like a hammer. My silence had shifted. No longer surrender. Now, it was strategy. From the dining room, Shanitra's laugh sliced the air too sharp, too staged. Trevon lingered in the doorway, caught between being my son and being a stranger. The phone in my pocket lit up. This time, I pulled it out. One line glowed on the screen, and my blood chilled. They know you know. I walked back into the dining room with the cold of the back gate still clinging to my skin. Faces lit under the chandelier, the hum of the playlist, forks tapping porcelain like nothing had shifted. But I knew better. I let my eyes sweep the table. The decanter stood at 2 o'clock, my glass waiting at 4. Trevon wouldn't meet my gaze. Shanitra's smile curved too sharp, cut from glass instead of flesh. I slowed my breathing the way I did, standing over smoke pits or in church pews long in, steady out. Courtesy would be my camouflage, truth, my blade. I folded the napkin on my lap once more, not for show, but for order. Order before action, dignity before noise. Then came her clink. Shanitra rose with that bright sound of crystal, commanding the room, a toast to family and new beginnings. The words fell rehearsed, stage ready. She took the decanter herself, pouring around the table, saving mine for last. Every eye followed. A neighbor chuckled. Make sure Pop gets the good stuff. Laughter rolling like a dare. Trevon half rose, his body trying to coax me without words. I turned the stem of my glass slow, the legs clinging wrong, the scent rising hot instead of warm. I lifted it only enough for the crowd to see, not enough to drink. That silence of mine said everything I would not be cornered. Her rhythm broke. Shanitra's breathing came faster. Her blink stuttered. Control slipping. Omarique moved by with the water jug, his knuckles grazing my wrist just a second enough. I watched the watchers. One neighbor craned forward. Trevon's knee bounced hard under the table. A lie needs audience, I thought. Truth just needs time. I lined my utensils at 12 and 6. Ritual. Steady hands. A plan formed. Document. Preserve. Report. Phone on my thigh. Dim screen hidden. My thumb pressed emergency. Then 911. I kept my eyes up, coughed low to mask my words. I gave name, address, suspicion. I asked for units. No extras, no drama. The operator told me to stay on. I laid the phone face down by my plate. Mic open to the whole show. I slid my water glass before the wine. A guard draped my napkin over the rim like a tent. No fingerprints lost. No contents disturbed. Time stamped in my mind. The way my father taught me to clock in. Mr. Elridge, Shanitra chirped. Syrup laid thick. We're waiting for your sip. A neighbor coughed laughter, but no one looked easy. I said it plain. I'll toast in my own time. Not loud, not apologetic. Trevon stared at his plate, shame anchoring his eyes. I set my palm over the tinted glass. The universal no. Silence draped over us. The playlist suddenly louder because the room had gotten honest. I held it till it belonged to me. I turned to my son, not her. Trevon, I won't drink tonight. We can talk as men, but we won't play pretend. He swallowed, flickered back to the boy I once knew, then snapped into performance again. Calm, I added. Don't let nobody make you cruel in your own house. Rope thrown. He didn't take it. Not yet. Shanitra's mask slipped. Her voice cooled. Perhaps you're not used to this vintage, Mr. Elridge. I met her tone, steady. I'm used to food and drink that don't need a cover story. The neighbors stiffened. The perfume of politeness died in the air. She pushed again, soft dagger under lace. We simply want you comfortable at your age. I set my fork down, eyes level. Comfort doesn't come from a glass. Someone else is eager for me to empty. That line landed. The room knew I wasn't on her script. I angled my phone just enough to catch voices. Tone. Pressure. Evidence logging itself. I scanned the sideboard funnel towel, dropper tucked. Wrong. I didn't touch, just counted. Memorized. My plate nudged a hair to keep the phone steady, mic open, breath even, hand steady. Evidence needs calm hands. Then Trevon, his whisper cracking. Pop, just one sip for me. I looked at him like I did when he was 8, swearing the broken window wasn't his doing. Love in my eyes, not softness. I'll stand with you when you stand with truth, I told him. Not before. His eyes blinked hard, a man deciding which man he wanted to be. I gave him a small nod, the door still open. He stayed seated. He didn't move. From the foyer, I caught it. The soft click of a deadbolt sliding. A sound meant to be missed. The playlist dropped quieter, like a stagehand adjusting volume. Shanitra smoothed the tablecloth, calm as if setting the stage for the next act. The door locked, the room smiled, and I realized the performance wasn't for me, it was for the cleanup. Trevon finally lifted his head, voice sharper than I'd ever heard from him. You don't belong here, Pop. Not in this life. His words carried the chill of a blade pressed against skin blood, turning against blood. He rose tall, his posture carved in Shanitra's mold, not mine. The neighbors shifted. A few murmurs passed like wind over dry grass, some looking away, ashamed to watch a son cut his father down. My jaw tightened, but my hands stayed folded, steady as stone. Silence became my shield. Betrayal has its own sound. It's your child, putting pride before truth. Shanitra's smile spread wide, teeth flashing like victory. Finally, Trevon speaks his mind, she sang, her voice dripping with triumph. She poured herself another glass, wrist slow, deliberate, exaggerated for the crowd. "This house is ours, Mr. Elridge. Your season has passed." A neighbor gave a thin laugh, unsure whether to support or retreat. She moved to stand beside Trevon, resting her hand on his shoulder like she was crowning him king. Room tilted, an audience witnessing a coronation built on cruelty. I blinked once, and memory crashed in. My boy, 10 years old, standing in front of the church, voice trembling as he recited his first psalm. My hand on his back, steadying him, whispering that he was strong enough to carry his name. My late wife's voice floated through that memory. "He'll need your backbone one day." Now that same boy's eyes were cold, his voice sharpened against me. Two versions of him alive in one room, tearing at me from both sides. My chest hurt, but grief didn't own me. Pain only hardened my resolve. Then came the knife of betrayal in full. Trevon lifted his glass high, turning toward the neighbors instead of me. To new leadership, leaving the past behind. Laughter spilled, some forced, some gleeful. He didn't toast me. He toasted my absence. I heard one neighbor mutter, "cold-blooded," under their breath. But nobody moved to stop it. My son sealed the betrayal, not in whispers, but in performance. And performance carries witnesses. I leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, gaze steady as iron. Funny thing about the past, it keeps receipts. The playlist hiccuped, faltering for just a beat. The room froze. I slid my phone closer, the faint red light blinking under the edge of linen. Shanitra's smile twitched, eyes darting to the glow. Silence hung heavy. They didn't know what I'd caught, but they feared it. That was enough. I tapped once, and her own voice spilled into the room, low but clear. "Make sure his glass is last." The sound of her whisper twisted free, undeniable. Gasps spread like fire forks clattered. A prayer mumbled in the corner. Trevon's face drained, his bravado slipping, recognition crawling across his eyes. Shanitra lunged for the phone, but my hand was there first, calm, unshaken, covering it like a stone slab. I spoke even, each word measured. Truth don't need volume to shake walls. Her own voice had become the hammer against her mask. One neighbor whispered, "Lord have mercy." Another shifted in their chair, eyes darting to the locked door, realizing what danger they sat in. A couple leaned back, loyalty cracking in their silence. Shanitra laughed sharp, brittle like glass under strain, but no warmth came with it. Trevon's sweat ran, his shoulders twitching. Piece by piece, their show fell apart. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. This house carries my blood, my labor, my prayers. You don't erase that with a glass of wine. My eyes locked on Trevon's, not hers. "Son, you still got a chance to choose better." His shoulders trembled, stuck between her hand and my words. I let silence hold him, not rage pressure that could break chains or break a man. The room felt my authority, not loud, but immovable. From outside, the faint wail of sirens drifted closer. The call was still alive. Shanitra heard it too, her smile cracked wider, panic leaking through the edges. Trevon looked from me to the door, loyalty and fear tearing at him. The neighbors grew restless, shifting like they wanted to be anywhere but trapped here. My pulse was steady, my plan intact. The sirens grew louder, and I knew the truth was about to walk through that door. The sirens outside drew a straight line up the street and landed on our curb. The whole house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the knock. Shanitra's smile froze in place, her teeth showing but no warmth left behind them. Trevon's knee kept shaking under the table, tapping out a rhythm of nerves he couldn't hide. I angled my phone so the faint glow confirmed the 911 call was still live, mic up. The napkin over my untouched glass stayed firm, a little white tent I'd raised not for surrender, but for truth. The neighbors traded glances, unsure whether they were still guests at dinner or now witnesses at a hearing. I whispered to myself, barely moving my lips, "Steady, Wes. This next part ain't about noise. It's about names, times, and hands." 3 heavy knocks came against the front door. A voice followed. "Montclair Police, open up." Shanitra raised her voice, trying to sound calm. "We're fine, officers." Her tone stretched too thin. I stood, walked to the foyer, and spoke through the wood. "Caller is Wesley Elridge. Doors secured. Exigent circumstances, possible adulteration." A pause, then a firm reply. "Step back, sir." Tools rattled, a heavy thunk. The lock gave way, and the door opened. 2 uniforms entered first, followed by Detective Mallory King. Her eyes swept the room in one glance, and I could tell she'd seen this kind of show before. I lifted my palm toward the table. "Evidence sits under that linen." Gloved hands moved quickly. King nodded toward the napkin-tinted glass and the decanter beside it. I recited my timestamps: first pour attempt, second text, the moment of my 911 call. A neighbor leaned forward and added without prompting, "He never drank." King photographed the funnel left on the sideboard, the towel folded wrong, the faint film clinging to 2 glasses. "She asked me not to touch a thing." I answered steady, wasn't planning to. My hands stayed open at my sides, the discipline of years in kitchens keeping me calm. Chain of custody had rules, and I meant to honor them. Shanitra let out a light laugh, brittle. "This is absurd. We were having a family toast." She turned to the detective. "Surely, you see the misunderstanding." King's voice was flat. "I see a live 911 line and a reported adulterant, no wiggle room in her tone." Shanitra pivoted, her smile thinning. "Mr. Elridge is elderly, perhaps confused." I met her eyes and said plain, "Elderly ain't the same as blind." The words hung in the air, cutting sharper than any insult. The difference between manners and truth filled the room. Trevon's eyes kept skipping toward the glass, like a compass pointing to guilt. I gave him one line, soft but firm. "You can still stand on the right side of this." He swallowed hard, but chose silence. His silence was a vote for her, at least for now. One neighbor whispered a scripture, low, like the house itself needed prayer. I squared my shoulders, not to intimidate, but to hold steady. Love doesn't excuse harm. It demands you stop it. I tapped my phone and brought my attorney onto speaker. His voice filled the space. "This is Counsel Perry Holt." I spoke clear. "I have not consumed any beverage poured here. I will not sign any document in this house." Holt's voice carried weight. "Mr. Elridge's LLC assets are trust-shielded. Any power of attorney or transfer executed tonight would be void. We filed revocation last quarter." King added, "We'll secure any documents related to asset transfer." Shanitra's face cracked, the plan that thrived in fog now drowning under floodlights. I felt vindication, not triumph. The aim wasn't spectacle, it was safety. The officers bagged the decanter and my glass separately. King narrated every move for the audio still live on my phone. I gave them details: who poured what, when. No adjectives, no drama. Just verbs and times. I asked them to note Omarike for protection, and King nodded. "We'll get his statement." Neighbors wrote down their numbers, some apologizing quietly for not speaking up earlier. I signed only the officer's witness card. In my chest, something unclenched, just a little. He brought the bottle. Maybe it was already bad. I answered calm. That bottle never touched my glass. Until your hand touched it. King raised a brow. We'll let the lab talk. My phone whispered her earlier words again. Make sure his glass is last. The room heard her then, and her silence now. Masks don't fall in a crash. They slide off slow. I straightened the linen tent one last time, that small ritual, anchoring me from start to finish. A faint rosemary scent rose from the centerpiece. I remembered how she pinned a sprig on me when I came in, smiling wide. I removed it carefully and laid it beside the bagged glass. A marker of what had been for show. My eyes found Trevon, not her. Son, this ain't the last time somebody will test who you are. His eyes shined, but the tears stayed back. Men raised on pride often need permission to weep. I gave him a look that held both judgment and shelter. Detective King spoke calm. Mr. Elridge, we'll need a full statement at the precinct. Officers moved toward Shanitra, and the room tilted toward consequence. I drew in a breath, once for the boy I raised, once for the man I still had to be. When the cuffs clicked, the house finally exhaled, and I realized the hardest truth wasn't about them. It was about who my son would choose to be tomorrow. The precinct lights hummed steady, a kind of noise that settles into your bones when you've been under it long enough. I sat there with my jacket folded on the chair back, phone bagged as evidence, my name spelled right on the intake sheet. Detective King asked me to walk through the timeline again. I gave her verbs, times, where each hand had moved. Counsel Holt was on speaker, listening close. Every so often he cut in soft, say untouched, Wes. Don't say didn't drink. I followed his lead. I spoke of the text that warned me, the napkin tent, the sound of the deadbolt. It came out clean, like a kitchen line. Order in, order out, nothing wasted. I kept the weight of my feelings in my chest. Truth doesn't need decoration to matter. King thanked me for being steady. I told her steady is how old men make it to old. Neighbors filed in behind me, their words softer than they'd been at that table. One admitted. He laughed at the toast and said it made him sick now. Omarique told the story in his quiet voice, poor order. The towel, the funnel tucked wrong. His hands shook, but he didn't stop. Officers photographed the draft papers Shanitra had ready. Holt muttered, there it is. I signed the witness card, not a press sheet. No cameras, no interviews. When they released me past midnight, I stepped into the night air. November carried rain and relief together. I pulled my collar up and texted a verse to myself. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. By Monday morning, the courthouse buzzed with voices not meant for comfort. Shanitra came in chained at the wrists, polished suit stretched thin over the weight of charges. The judge read them out. Attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse. Words land different when they echo in a courtroom. She kept her eyes straight ahead. My son sat behind the defense table, his hands clenched, his eyes red from something more than lost sleep. The prosecutor listed early lab findings, film on the glass, substances pending full tox, bail terms locked down, passports gone, contact barred. No more rumor, public record now. I didn't look at her. I looked at him, so he'd know his father didn't stand for shame but for truth. Back home, the community currents rolled in. Church folk texted prayer hands. Some sent apologies for silence. A neighbor left me a voicemail, voice trembling. I was wrong to laugh. I saved it, not to replay, but to forgive. Holt drafted a simple statement. Cooperating fully, no further comment. That was enough. I didn't post, I cooked. Onions, garlic, thyme. The kind of scent that tells you Sunday is close. I told myself, silence isn't hiding. It's choosing ground you can grow on. The mirror showed me both my age and my father's eyes. I nodded to both. Later that week, I met Trevon in the park. Bare trees. No house, no stage, no audience. He started with, "I'm sorry." Then, "I panicked." Then, nothing at all. Truth stumbles when pride is tired. I told him, "I accept the part that's yours, not the part that ain't." Conditions followed: evaluation, counseling, restitution, no contact with her. And the line he had to hear: "You are my son. You are not my shield or my weakness." He nodded like a man learning how to walk again. I didn't hug him. That comes after steps, not before. 2 weeks later, I stood in my Crown Heights kitchen and offered Omarique a role manager in training. "Courage is a skill we promote here." He shook his head, said he wasn't ready, didn't have the papers. I told him, "We'll train what's trainable. We'll sponsor what's missing." I walked him down the line. Inventory, respect, record. I showed him the old safe. No cash in it, just scraps of history. Some things we keep, so we remember what not to keep. He signed, hands steady now. The staff clapped once, short and sure, then went back to work. That's how kitchens celebrate quick, and then keep moving. I folded a napkin on table 6, same tent as that night, but different meaning now. Not defense choice, protection you set yourself. A sprig of rosemary pinned to my apron, not my lapel. It told the crew, we season with honesty here. A regular asked what was new on the menu. I said, boundaries. He laughed, till he didn't. He got it. I started a neighbors board. Free meal cards for folks who speak up when it's hard. The echo of that night became promise instead of scar. In my head, I wrote a letter I'll never send. We did right by what we raised, I told my late wife. I listed the mercies, the operator who stayed on the line, the detective who listened, the boy who warned. I confessed the part of me that wanted to drink just to keep peace, and how peace asked for the opposite. I admitted I still want our son's voice to sound like church again. I promised I'd hold the door without holding my breath. I folded that letter, same as a napkin, and put it away. So, I'll say it plain now, as if I'm talking straight across the table. Some of y'all know that quiet where folks try to rewrite your name. What would you have done? Stayed seated or walked out? Family can be the test, not the answer. And sometimes the answer is simply, not tonight. Elders listening, drop your lines for the young. 2 words, 1 lesson. If you're hurt, get help. If you're safe, be somebody's safety. That's the work. When I closed the restaurant that night, I set rosemary in the window and folded a napkin neat beside it. A text buzzed Trevon. Day 3. I'm still in the program. I typed back, Day 3 is how day 30 starts. I turned the sign off, stepped outside. The street held its breath, then let it go. I walked home steady. Not because the world was kinder now, but because I finally was.